Let's talk about sex, baby. Hey, it's Monica, and today I'm going to be chatting to you about sex education, season 3, specifically season 3, because it's been so long and I do not remember what happened in the first 2 seasons. I'm going to be real with you. So first, season 3 of sex education was really good. I loved it. I know there's been some mixed feelings about it, but I was really into it. And in this video, I'm going to chat about what I liked about it, maybe a few problems I have with it, and address some of the problems I've heard other people talk about that I might disagree with or agree with. So let's get into it. First, this will definitely contain spoilers. I was thinking about maybe trying to do a spoiler-free type situation, but I don't think I'm very capable of that. I think I am a massive spoil sport. No, it's not right. Oh my god, I was trying to draw while recording this, but then I decided, no, that's too hard. I'm just gonna talk, because that's easier. Just talking for now. So the basic premise of sex education is that it is a sex education. I think some people might start by describing the characters, like who are supposed to be the main characters, like Otis and Maeve and Eric and Jean, but I do not think that's really what the show's about. It feels more like the show is about trying to teach people as much as possible about all the different things that come up when it comes to stuff like sex. Obviously, it is a show, so it's still about characters and it's about relationships, but I also think one of the bigger points of the show is basically telling as many diverse stories as possible, and I really appreciate that about the show. It definitely tackles a lot of very important conversations. I mean, sometimes that need to tell as many stories as possible hurts the narrative in certain ways and hurts the overall feel of the show, but I do really appreciate that part of the show and that aspect of it. But first, I will touch on Otis, because that is what people do. They start by talking about all of the characters, and I think that is a really good way to talk about the show, is just by discussing each of the characters. A lot of people do not like Otis, and that's kind of fair. He has definitely done a lot of pretty awful things, especially when he's jealous of Maeve's other love interest. He is a very flawed character. He can be quite rude to his mum, and he has a lot of moments where he treats people quite badly. Still, I've heard a lot of people talking about how they don't like how absent Otis is from this season, how he doesn't seem very present. There's just so many stories going on, how Otis doesn't really seem to be the focus of these stories, and the other main characters don't really seem to be the focus either. And yes, I do think Otis is less the focus, but we see Otis's effect on people through this telling of everyone else's stories, because Otis has had a massive effect on all the characters, and you see the little ways he'll talk to people throughout the season, and then that will kind of snowball into them either understanding themselves better or forging better relationships with other people, and I think that's really wonderful to see. Even though in this season Otis's arc is more about him wondering if it's his place to try and help people in that way, in the same way his mum does, because he's not a real therapist, he's not an expert. So it's very likely that he could say the wrong thing and hurt someone, because he is not a professional, even though professional therapists can obviously do the wrong thing and say the wrong thing to people. I think a beautiful example of how Otis is prominent in the season, even when it seems like he isn't, is how he has a small conversation with Adam about how to talk to people, and maybe he struggles so much with talking to people because he feels observed and he doesn't like feeling observed. And so he gives Adam the advice to maybe try to get people to not look at him when he's speaking, or to not look at them. And that is advice Adam uses several times throughout the season, and you see it help him develop and express himself properly. And that's really nice to see. And I love seeing Otis interact with Eric. I think that is another lovely relationship in the show, a lovely friendship, and I love seeing lovely friendships in shows. I feel like that's such an important part of life that is often overlooked in media. There's a lot I want to say about Eric, but we'll discuss Eric later. Otis has some of his worst moments when he is around Maeve. He does some of the worst things he does as a character, and it's really sad because I think the best relationships and the ones I root for the most in media are the ones where the characters elevate each other and they make each other better or happier as people. But you don't really see that with Maeve and Otis. You've definitely got a bit of Otis helping Maeve value human connection a bit more, but you don't really get a lot of it feeding back into Otis learning stuff about himself. Not that I've seen. There wasn't a moment for me where I was like, oh, Otis has really learned this from Maeve. That's great. Apart from maybe Maeve helping him discover something he's good at with the sex clinic. But I feel like that is less about Maeve personally and more just about Otis doing something or trying something that he finds out he's really good at. The things with Maeve and Otis also tend to be really repetitive. I think I really liked Sex Education, and I really liked it up until the end of season 2. And then the last episode of season 2 with the whole voicemail thing, that really irritated me. I hate those kind of cliffhangers where the whole focal point is just some kind of miscommunication. And we'll talk more about that later, but that kind of stuff really annoys me. The whole dragging out romantic subplots through cheap miscommunication. It irritates me. A lot of people really, really love Eric, and I also do love Eric as a character. I think he's really cool. He has his great moments, especially with Otis. I feel like Otis and Eric have really great interactions. But I also feel like Eric does a lot of shitty things in season 3 that aren't treated as shitty things. Because I'm all for flawed characters, but the important thing of portraying a flawed character is that the writers know that they're portraying a flawed character. They know that the character is doing shitty things, and that usually comes into play in the story, either through people calling them out on the shitty things they're doing, or consequences for the shitty things they've done. And it doesn't really feel like we get that with Eric. First of all, one of the things I really didn't like, and what a lot of people don't seem to be talking about, is how much Eric pressured Adam. Adam was just starting out trying to be comfortable with himself, and Eric does a lot of pressuring him to come out and be more gay, if that makes any sense. And I think that's kind of damaging for a queer person, to be pressured to come out when they're not ready to come out, or to be pressured to do things they're not necessarily comfortable with doing yet. And that can be a slow build-up of getting more comfortable with yourself and what you want. And I don't think Eric respected Adam's journey enough. I feel like he was trying to rush him because he wanted the gay now. And I think that's okay, and that's a kind of normal reaction for Eric to feel kind of stifled by his relationship with Adam because Adam isn't at the level he's at. But I think it was handled poorly in that Adam seemed to always kind of be treated like the bad person in that scenario, in that Eric didn't ever get any consequences, or no one ever pointed out to Eric that it was kind of wrong of him to be pressuring Adam to come out to his mum or to be more gay than he was comfortable being at that point. I do think it's important for Adam to feel like he can express himself however he wants to and get there in his own time, but also understand that it's okay to be gay and that it's okay to want the things he wants. But it just didn't feel that way to me. It didn't feel like Eric was respecting his journey. And I feel like that reflected a lot in the way they broke up, in that Eric definitely did something wrong, in that he kissed someone else while he was in Nigeria, but he's still the one who's kind of breaking up with Adam as if Adam has done something wrong, and it's very strange to me. But I am quite happy they're broken up, actually, because this season has really made me love Adam as a character. I feel like he gets a lot of very beautiful development, and he's really growing as a person. And I feel like Eric, in a way, was holding him. He was kind of a crutch. I wouldn't say holding him back, but Eric felt like a crutch for Adam. It felt like Eric was leading all of the development, whereas it's a lot nicer for a character when it feels like they're leading their own development. And I feel like we can really get that now more. Like, there were definitely moments where it felt like Adam was leading his own development. But now we can really see that properly if there's a next season. I think there's a next season. There should be, right? of Adam possibly leading his own development a bit more. Because it always worries me when someone is trying to improve themselves and change for the better, but they're doing it solely because of a romantic relationship with someone else. Because romantic relationships, they come and they go, and you don't ever want to be changing and hinging all of your development on one person, because then when that person is gone, you can backslide. And I was really worried when they broke up, Adam was going to backslide, but it really doesn't seem like they're going in that direction, which I really like. And I think the poem at the end where he thanked Eric for showing him he had a heart was very sweet and really indicative of the development we'll see in Adam later on, and I'm very happy about that. And now let's talk about Maeve. I do think Maeve was maybe slightly out of character in this season, although I think that was more her trying to push herself back into who she was before and her not really realizing how she's changed. Like, there's this scene where she tells someone she doesn't trust anyone, and you're like, well, that's not really true anymore. You trust Amy, you trust Otis. And it seems weird that she's saying that, because that doesn't really make sense from what we've seen her do in the show. But I think that's kind of the point, because she is really stuck in the past, and she's really stuck in her own way of thinking that she shouldn't trust anyone. And so she's like, I'm a strong person, I don't need anyone, I don't trust anyone, even though that's really not the case anymore. So I don't think that was as out of character as a lot of people think that is. I think that was more of a reflection of how she saw herself, even though we kind of know, watching her, that it's not really true anymore. And I think it was an important part of her development to address that and then realize that that's not really true anymore, and that she does trust people now. She trusts Amy and she trusts Otis. Although I do feel like she forgave Isaac very quickly for the voicemail thing. The voicemail thing, we've got to talk about that. Because how dare... Oh, it made me so angry at the end of season 2 when I saw Isaac leave that voicemail, because then you know it's going to be this whole miscommunication thing, which I hate. I'm really glad they kind of sorted through that quite quickly early in the season and they didn't drag that out, because I would have just been really annoyed if they dragged that out. But I have really mixed feelings about Isaac as a character, because on the one hand, I really appreciate how he was brave enough to tell Maeve the truth. He didn't have to admit that he deleted the voicemail. It might not have been discovered if he didn't tell her that he deleted the voicemail, but he did. He respected her enough to tell her the truth, and I really like that. I think that's really brave. It's very hard to admit when you've done something wrong, especially when you could potentially get away with it. But I think it was somewhat undercut by him immediately trying to justify it in like a knight in shining armor way, when he was like, oh, I was just trying to protect you. It's like, no, that's not an excuse. That's not a reason. That's not a good reason, because that's not respecting Maeve to make her own decisions and giving her all the information she needs to make those decisions. And I get that a lot of it was his own insecurity, because he cares about Maeve a lot and he really wants to be with her, and he was worried that she'd choose Otis, because let's be real, she probably would. But in a way, that's just his biggest self-sabotage. And it was also very confusing when he broke up with Maeve at the end, like, I deserve someone who wants to be with me completely. It was weird that he said that, because that completely contradicts his actions of deleting the voicemail, because it seemed like he was deleting the voicemail because he was worried she'd pick Otis, and now he's saying, pick Otis if you want, I'm not going to be second place to someone else. And it's just kind of like, what though? What? Why did you delete the voicemail then, you weirdo? But yeah, I would have been way more furious about that, because that's an invasion of her privacy. When he deleted the voicemail, that is hiding, that's lying, that's hiding things from her, and butting into her personal life in a really damaging way, and it affected her relationship with other people, and it made her unhappy. And he was saying it was to protect her, and that's infuriating. That's such toxic behavior. So the fact that she kind of brushed it off quite easily, I was really surprised by. I do understand in a way, because he did admit it to her, but then the way he tried to justify it, I think, kind of undercut the fact that he admitted it to her, to me. But that's just my opinion there. But oh my god, later, when Maeve is going through something with her mum taking her sister, and then both Isaac and Otis show up to have like a weird dick measuring contest. It really made me dislike both of those characters. It made me think neither of them deserved Maeve, which is a problematic way of thinking because it's not about who deserves who, it's about what Maeve wants, and she wants Otis, and I respect that. But oh my god, could they not just put aside their bullshit for 2 seconds and support Maeve through a tough time? And the way Isaac immediately left when he found out about her and Otis was kind of like, oh, okay, so you only care about me if I'm in a relationship with you type situation. Like, as soon as he thought they weren't going to be in a romantic relationship because she likes Otis more, he just dropped her. He stopped supporting her through her tough situation with her sister. I feel like that should have taken precedence over everything else, is that her mum kidnapped her sister. Like, she's going for a really rough time right now. Can you boys just be chill and support her as friends? So that just made me dislike both of those characters with Maeve, personally. And I honestly really loved Otis and Ruby. I know that's actually quite a common feedback for this season. I've been watching lots of YouTube videos trying to get a sense of what people were saying about it. But Otis and Ruby was actually really wholesome. And I also heard someone saying like they really hated how Otis treated Ruby. But I would disagree in saying that Otis did anything wrong. He made an honest attempt at being in a relationship with Ruby. And it didn't work out because he didn't have those feelings for her as quickly as she had those feelings for him. And that doesn't mean he's done anything wrong. He chose to be honest about that, and I absolutely respect that, because you should not lie about being in love with people, in my opinion. It's counterproductive. And I really liked how Otis could just be honest and say, I'm sorry, I don't have those feelings for you yet. Like, he wasn't saying he wouldn't ever, he was saying right now, those are not my feelings. But Ruby chose to end it there. She didn't want to potentially wait for him to catch up to her feelings, which is also very fair. She just doesn't want to be in that position. And I really liked that storyline. I'm sad though, because they were such a cute couple. I wish they tried to fight through it. It felt like they just had to rush the romantic storylines between Otis and Ruby and Maeve and Isaac, because they wanted to get back to the Otis and Maeve thing. So they kind of just abandoned those plot lines as quickly as possible, which makes me wonder why they were even in there in the first place, if I'm being honest. Although I really did love what we saw of Ruby from that. And more trios of characters. We have Jackson and Viv and Cal. And I really think Cal was a cool addition. It was cool to have some non-binary people in the cast. Although it also kind of seemed like they didn't have anything going on outside of being non-binary, which was a bit weird, because usually the show is pretty good at portraying a lot of facets in a person and not making one-note characters. But I think Viv's storyline was really interesting. She was acting kind of awful for most of the season, in that she was basically betraying her friends to try get ahead. But you could also see how she wasn't fully narking. Like, she didn't really narc on anyone during the season, even though that's really what Hope wanted her to do. She lied about things going on the bus trip, and I feel like people don't give her a lot of credit for that. Like, she was never fully in with Hope. She was always kind of like, I still don't want to rat people out though. I still care about these people and I don't want them to get in trouble. But at the same time, she just really wants to succeed and have a good future and secure that for herself, and that's pretty fair. But I really like how it came back around to her realizing, you know what, no, I care about the students more than I care about my future or my position as head girl. And then she was kind of the inciting factor in rallying everyone to protest at the end, which I really liked. And Jackson's whole storyline, I've never really felt that much for Jackson, I feel, in the last few seasons. I never really connected with him that much, but I really liked him in this season. I feel like he became less stereotypical jock, which, I mean, again, he wasn't really that in the second season, but it still kind of felt like he didn't have much going on. And it felt like he had a lot more going on this time with him. I mean, it was the same kind of stuff with him trying to figure out what he does, what he wants to do, and what he's good at. And I've heard some criticism around him never figuring it out. Like a lot of the characters go in circles of not really figuring out what they want and what they want to do. But I think that's really fair because they're teenagers, and that's not the kind of thing you just decide once and then you're like, yep, okay, I've got it. I figured everything out. I know exactly what my future holds. It is kind of a circular process when you're trying to figure out what you want out of life. And you're never really done, I feel, with that journey. Even as an adult, I feel like sometimes you question what you're doing and what you could be doing and what you might like doing. And we see that a lot with the old headmaster, how he now as an adult is basically starting from scratch with no job and no wife and trying to figure out what he likes. And I really like that storyline too. Even though I hated him in the first 2 seasons, he was the worst. But this show really has a way of making you feel for characters who were the worst. Because it does that with Adam too. I also really didn't like Adam. He was a bully, and I really hated him with Eric at first because he was a bully and he physically assaulted Eric and made Eric feel unsafe, and that was not good in any way. But then you really start to see him grow, and you start to kind of... I still never really liked him with Eric, just because their dynamic was always a bit off and problematic, but they had such cute moments, which I really liked. And then there's Ola. And I feel like a lot of people don't like Ola because she's a real angry girl. She is an angry teenager. But I respect that portrayal because I feel like it is important. It's important to show angry teenagers, not just as the worst, because teenagers are angry, man. I was an angry teenager. I feel like it's pretty fair. And she is kind of not very likable in the last 2 seasons. She's been kind of standoffish to everyone, kind of mean. But you also get to see how she's trying to open up, like to Lily especially. She's going through tough times. She's trying to open up to her girlfriend and talk to her girlfriend, but her girlfriend is kind of ignoring her in favor of being caught up in her own little world. And you see how that hurts Ola and how she really wants someone to talk to when she doesn't seem to have that. And so I'm not that mad about all the kind of mean things she says to Otis and Jean because she's going through it, and I respect that. And Lily's arc, oh, sweetie. That was really upsetting, how she was just trying to be herself and the world was not here for it. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about Lily's arc. I feel like it was very well executed, very good, but it was not anything very groundbreaking. You know, we've all seen the weird person getting made fun of for being weird and then overcoming that to accept themselves. It's still a nice arc. It is what it is. I do love Lily as a character though. I mean, I love all the characters. All the characters are really good. Even ones I first didn't really like. They've really grown on me. And even though a lot of the characters do really shitty things, like Otis, I still like them. I still think they're good. And now I want to talk about Hope, the new head teacher, how she was the worst. She was awful, and she was basically Umbridge, and we all know this. But she had a lot of really cool moments with people where you really get to kind of see how problematic her thinking is. I think the earliest clues that she's just going to be the worst was really shortly after her introduction. She comes out of her office and Jackson and Adam are sitting there and she's expecting to see Jackson, and she looks at the two of them sitting on the bench, the white boy and the black boy, and she's like, oh, okay, so obviously the head boy is the white one, and straight up goes for it, being like, you must be Jackson. And it's just oh damn. She just did that. Why would she make that assumption? I mean, you know why. But it's just, oof. That, I really liked that moment. I thought that was a really good moment and very telling of very, warning bells type thing for Hope. Because before then, she hadn't really done anything too alarming. She'd been seeming like a cool, open-minded, cool teacher, young, cool teacher. And then we see that and it's ooh, oh no. And I think it's cool to see that acknowledged more, racial profiling, because I feel like that's something a lot of people like to wave under the bus or say is not actually real. Wave under the bus? Is that an expression? What did I just say? And I also really liked that moment with Viv, where she was basically telling Viv, if you want to succeed, you've got to let go of the things people have been teaching women to do, like being nice to other people, like let go of your feminine traits that the patriarchy are trying to teach you, and be cutthroat if you want to succeed. And like, oof, that's definitely one of those facets of feminism that I think definitely warrants some criticism. That isn't really feminism, is when you're saying like you can only be strong if you'll let go of your female traits. It is true that society has definitely taught women a lot of problematic things about themselves and about how to act. But I also think that in no way feminism should be brushing off feminine traits as not beneficial. So I think it was kind of cool to see the villain kind of showing that toxic thinking. And, you know, we obviously know it's toxic thinking. So now I'm going to talk about some things about the show as a whole. And a lot of people are saying that it's just too crowded, it's got too many characters. But I feel like that's always been one of the ways the show tells its stories. I feel like it's made it its mission to include as many diverse people as possible and tell as many stories as possible. And I actually really like that. It has its issues story-wise, of course. Like, there's definitely moments where you feel like they thought about the moment they wanted before they thought about which characters fit with the moment. They thought about what storylines they want. They thought about what they want to show and what messages they want to get out. And then they kind of twist the characters and the relationships into what they want them to be, just so they can tell those stories. And I think it's definitely a bit noticeable when some of the characters are a bit too articulate about what they're feeling and what they're going through. Like in Therapy, like I think Amy is a very good example of this. I really love her storyline, don't get me wrong, but like when she's talking to Jean, she just very easily, instantly is able to say exactly how she's feeling about everything and articulate it in exactly the right way and say where it's coming from, essentially, and just be like, these are all the problems I'm having. And it just, I don't know, it seems a bit like too easy for characters to just be able to spit out exactly the right thing, to just be able to exactly articulate everything they're feeling and all the problems they're having very instantly as soon as someone asks. And even with Adam a lot, even though he's a character who has been shown multiple times to have a lot of trouble articulating his feelings, he has those moments where suddenly he's able to articulate them perfectly, like his conversation with Otis. Like suddenly he has no problems telling Otis exactly how he feels about things, and it's just a bit like, oh, okay, I guess so. But I still really I don't really mind that it's kind of a show with messages first and everything else second, because I really appreciate the messages it's trying to tell, because they're important things that people need to know. And I think that's kind of the point of the show, getting back to it. It's about the sex education. I'm taking that literally. For example, you've got the whole thing with the non-binary characters and them talking about chest binding and how you can do that unsafely and how you can do that safely. And that's definitely a very important thing for non-binary people to know in the real world. And so I feel like there are lots of moments like that where you're like, wow, I really love the messages you're getting across and the things you're talking about. I don't necessarily like how we got there. I don't necessarily like what the characters have been made to do in order to get to these messages, but I just love all the messages. And so, you know, I'm willing to forgive a lot of the show's flaws just because I think it has a lot of really important things to say and it says them very well. So yeah, that was my chat about Sex Education Season 3. I'm not sure if it even made sense. This is probably the longest video I will ever put out. Well, it's definitely the longest video so far. So I hope you enjoyed that. Like, comment, subscribe. That's what people say on YouTube. That's what I'm saying now. Bye!